Step into a world where the air is heavy with the scent of history, where grand halls echo with the whispers of long-dead courtiers and the clink of goblets held by trembling hands. You're not in a fairy tale, though the stories we're about to tell might make you wish you were. Welcome to Grim Chronicles, where we rip away the polished veneer of royalty to reveal the bizarre, the grotesque, and the downright unhinged lives of kings who ruled with absolute power and absolute madness. Today, we're diving into the tales of 11 monarchs whose habits were so wild they make the strangest modern celebrity look like a model of restraint. Picture kings who thought they were made of glass, emperors who dined with horses, and one poor soul who laughed himself to death over a dear joke. This is history at its weirdest, and trust me, you're not ready for what's coming. So settle in, keep your nose plugged for the stench, and let's walk into the chaotic courts of these deranged rulers. Imagine you're an ambassador in the early 1600s, stepping into the throne room of King James I of England. The smell hits you first. A rancid mix of unwashed flesh, rotten eggs, and something you can't quite place but definitely don't want to. This is the man who commissioned the Bible still read by millions, a scholar king whose name looms large in history. But up close, he's a walking disaster. James hadn't bathed in years, his clothes crawling with lice that courtiers swore they could see hopping like tiny acrobats. His tongue was too big for his mouth, so he drooled constantly, slurring his words like a tavern drunk. You'd expect a king with his power to at least try to keep it together, but James embraced the chaos, laughing off the fleas and waving away the stench as if it were just part of the royal charm. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder how anyone bowed to him without gagging. And yet, as grim as that sounds, James was practically normal compared to the lunatics we're about to meet. When you give someone a crown, a scepter, and an army of yes-men who nod at every whim, you don't get wise rulers. You get men who spiral into the kind of madness that makes your weirdest coworker look sane. Let's start our journey with Charles VI of France, a king who ruled in the late 1300s and early 1400s, when France was a glittering powerhouse of medieval Europe. Charles had everything: wealth, armies, a court that sparkled with ambition. But inside his mind, things were far less regal. He suffered from what he called glass delusions, a bizarre belief that his body was made of fragile glass, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. Picture the most powerful man in France tiptoeing through his palace, terrified that a clumsy servant or a sudden hug would turn him into a pile of shards. To protect himself, he had iron rods sewn into his clothes like some medieval crash test dummy. He banned anyone from touching him, refused to sit down too quickly, and sometimes forgot he was even king. His advisors would have to nudge him gently. "Your Majesty, you've got a council meeting." He'd blink, confused, and mutter, "Oh, right, I'm the king." It's almost sad. This mighty ruler reduced to a paranoid wreck, waddling around in reinforced robes, dodging contact like it was a death sentence. The wildest part? He wasn't alone. Glass delusions were a strange trend among medieval nobles, dubbed scholars' melancholia, as if thinking too hard could convince your brain you were a wine glass. Charles's story is a glimpse into a world where power and paranoia danced a twisted waltz, setting the stage for even stranger tales as we step deeper into this grim chronicle. As we leave the fragile world of Charles VI, we find ourselves in the icy palaces of 18th century Russia, where Peter III ruled with a childlike imagination that was anything but innocent. Picture an emperor with the vast Russian Empire at his command, armies stretching across continents, and a court waiting for his every order. But instead of wielding power, Peter was more likely to be found staging battles with toy soldiers. This grown man, married to the future Catherine the Great, was obsessed with dolls, not collecting them as art, but playing with them, complete with little voices and epic storylines. He'd force his entire court, including his formidable wife, to join in until 2 or 3 in the morning. Imagine Catherine, one of history's sharpest minds, stuck voicing a toy cavalry charge at dawn, muttering nay, nay while plotting her next move. It's no wonder rumors swirled that she had him assassinated. His official cause of death was hemorrhoidal colic, a fancy term for deadly backside pain, but let's be honest, That sounds like a cover story when your husband's idea of ruling is playing make-believe. Peter's quirks didn't stop at dolls. He was bizarrely obsessed with Prussia, wearing Prussian military uniforms, speaking German instead of Russian, and once holding a full military trial for a rat that chewed through his toy soldiers. He sentenced the rodent to death, only to pardon it because its gnawing reminded him of Prussian discipline. This is what happens when you give a man absolute power and a mind stuck in a toy box. His court must have been a circus, with advisors tiptoeing around his whims, wondering if today's agenda included governing or another rat trial. Peter's reign was a fleeting, absurd spectacle, but it pales in comparison to the chaos we're about to encounter as we move to a king whose hobbies included stealing from his own guests. In the sun-scorched palaces of mid-20th century Egypt, King Farouk redefined what it meant to be extra. This man had everything: palaces, thousands of tailored suits, a car collection that would make a modern billionaire jealous. Yet, with all that wealth, what did he do for fun? He became a pickpocket, not out of need but sheer boredom. Farouk trained himself in the art of sleight of hand, proudly calling it the hand of the thief. He was so good that Winston Churchill once left a meeting with him and realized his watch was gone, stolen by the king himself. At state dinners, guests would pat their pockets, only to find wallets, jewelry, even medals missing. Farouk didn't need the loot. He just craved the thrill of the steal. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder what goes through a king's mind when he's got everything but still wants to swipe your cufflinks. His eccentricities didn't stop there. Farouk was obsessed with the color red, owning hundreds of red cars and banning anyone else in Egypt from having one. If he saw a red car that wasn't his, he'd have it confiscated. Once, he shot out the tires of a red car that dared pass his convoy. Turns out it belonged to a diplomat. Just another day for Farouk, who seemed to thrive on chaos. He also had the world's largest pornography collection, which he insisted was for educational purposes. Sure, Farouk, 10,000 items, all for science. His gluttony was just as legendary. He'd order entire restaurant menus, not just dishes, and still complain he was hungry. His chairs had to be armless to fit his size, his bed reinforced to hold his weight. Farouk was a king who turned excess into an art form, leaving a trail of stolen watches and red cars in his wake. But as we leave his glittering, chaotic court, we're about to meet a king whose appetite led to a far more fatal end. The banquet hall of 15th century Aragon is our next stop, where King Martin, known as Martin the Humane, ruled with a reputation for kindness. But on one fateful night in 1410, his appetite got the better of him in a way that's almost too absurd to believe. Picture Martin at a feast, his table groaning under the weight of a meal fit for an army. But instead of sharing, he decides to tackle an entire goose by himself. Grease drips down his chin. His courtiers exchange nervous glances, and the room grows quiet as he powers through the bird like a man possessed. When he finally finishes, the court jester, desperate to lighten the mood, steps forward with a joke. It's not a good one. A deer is hanging by its tail from a tree for stealing figs. That's it, no punchline. Just a deer dangling for reasons unknown. Maybe it was the delivery, maybe it was the goose-induced delirium, but Martin found it hilarious. He starts laughing, a chuckle at first, then a full-on roar that shakes the hall. Minutes pass, then an hour, then 2, then 3. He's laughing so hard he can't breathe, his face turning purple, tears streaming down his cheeks. And then bam, he falls off his chair, dead. The official report called it indigestion. But let's be real. The goose set the stage, and the deer joke delivered the final blow. Imagine being that jester, your job to entertain, and you accidentally kill the king with a punchline that doesn't even land. Do you brag about it? Told a joke so funny it stopped a king's heart? Or do you flee before the next ruler hears about it? Martin's death is the kind of story that makes you question how royalty kept a straight face. But it's just a warm-up for the chaos we're about to witness in Denmark. In the late 1700s, the Danish court was home to Christian VII, a king whose daily routine was a masterclass in unhinged behavior. Imagine a state dinner, diplomats in their finest attire discussing trade, when suddenly, Slap. The king's hand connects with someone's face. No warning, no reason, just a royal smack to keep things lively. Christian did this to everyone. Foreign dignitaries, advisors, even at his own wedding. It was like his hand had a mind of its own, doling out slaps during peace talks or banquets. But that was just the beginning. At night, he'd tear through the palace, smashing furniture, shattering artwork, and leaping over tables like a deranged acrobat. Formal dinners became obstacle courses, with guests dodging flying plates and a king who thought vaulting the table was protocol. Then there was his dog, which Christian declared a government minister. Not as a joke. He expected his advisors to take orders from Minister Fluffy. Cabinet meetings must have been surreal, with serious men debating policy while glancing at a dog chewing its tail. Woof! Excellent point, Minister. Christian also loved leapfrog, but not with kids or in private. He'd force foreign ambassadors to play during official visits, turning peace negotiations into a bizarre playground game. Picture a diplomat, sent to secure a treaty, being told to jump over the king in the throne room. Do you let him win? Is there a rulebook for this? His personal habits were just as wild. His doctors prescribed a special chair to curb his excessive self-indulgence, if you catch my drift. Christian's court was a circus of chaos. But as we leave Denmark, we're headed to ancient Rome, where the emperor takes madness to a whole new level. Emperor Caligula, ruling in the 1st century AD, didn't just have quirks, he made weirdness a lifestyle. Let's start with his horse, Incitatus. This wasn't just a pet. It was a member of the imperial household, with a marble stable, an ivory manger, and a jeweled collar. Incitatus wore purple blankets, the imperial color that could get regular Romans executed, and had its own servants. Caligula invited the horse to dinner parties, not as a stunt, but as a guest, seated at the table, sipping wine from golden goblets while the emperor discussed politics and philosophy. He was planning to make Incitatus a consul, one of Rome's highest offices. Imagine losing a promotion to a horse. Sorry, Marcus. Incitatus has a better mane and a stable work ethic. Caligula's horse obsession was just the start. He declared himself a living god and demanded worship, dressing as Jupiter one day, Venus the next, Neptune on Wednesday, each persona requiring specific rituals. He'd stand next to temple statues and ask, "Who's more divine, me or this guy?" There was only one right answer. He built a 3-mile floating bridge across the Bay of Naples, just to ride Incitatus across it, wearing Alexander the Great's stolen breastplate. Why? A soothsayer once said he'd never be emperor, as likely as riding a horse across the bay. So, Caligula did it to prove a point. His court was a theater of the absurd, a fitting prelude to the fairy tale madness we're about to encounter in Bavaria. In the 19th century, Ludwig II of Bavaria, the Swan King, turned his kingdom into a living fairy tale. His castle, Neuschwanstein, inspired Disney's Cinderella Castle. But Ludwig didn't just build castles. He lived in them like the hero of a medieval romance. Dressed in knightly costumes, he wandered his palaces, lost in a world of Wagner's operas and ancient legends. He built an artificial cave with a waterfall and colored lights, where he'd float in a shell-shaped boat, playing Lohengrin, the Swan Knight. At night, he rode through the countryside in ornate sleighs, even in summer with wheels instead of runners, dressed as Louis XIV. His servants had to follow suit, dressing as medieval courtiers and keeping a nocturnal schedule, with morning rides at midnight and dinner at dawn. Ludwig's strangest habit was his dinner parties, not for the living, but for dead royals like Louis XIV and Marie Antoinette. He'd set the table, hold full conversations with empty chairs, toast their health, and ask their opinions on politics. Servants had to serve these ghostly guests, pouring wine and clearing untouched plates while keeping a straight face. Once, Ludwig had a servant's teeth pulled because their false teeth clicked, disrupting his fairy tale vibe. His court was a dream world where reality was optional. But as we leave Bavaria, we're headed to the Ottoman Empire, where a sultan's obsessions turned deadly. Sultan Ibrahim, known as Ibrahim the Mad, ruled in the 1640s after spending 22 years in the Kafes, a luxurious prison for Ottoman princes. When he finally got the throne, he went wild with power. His first obsession was fur. Not just wearing it, but covering everything in it. Walls, floors, ceilings. His palace was a furry nightmare. He'd wrap himself in sable furs, even in Istanbul's summer heat. His beard perfumed with amber. His clothes so heavy with jewels he could barely move. But his real fixation was women, specifically very large women. He sent a decree to find the fattest woman in the empire, and his agents brought back Sugar Cube, a 330-pound Armenian woman. Delighted, Ibrahim made her Governor-General of Damascus with a massive pension. His joy turned dark with paranoia. Convinced his 280 concubines were cheating, he ordered them all tied into weighted sacks and drowned in the Bosphorus. In one night, 280 women were gone, their screams echoing across the strait. One survived, swimming to shore and rescued by French sailors, giving us the grim details. Ibrahim's court was a place of excess and horror, a stark contrast to the calculated paranoia we're about to meet in ancient China. Emperor Qin Shi Huang, who unified China in the 3rd century BC, built the terracotta army and laid the groundwork for the Great Wall. But his fear of death drove him to madness. Obsessed with immortality, he sent expeditions to find mythical islands of eternal life. When that failed, he turned to alchemy, swallowing mercury pills like vitamins, bathing in mercury, and building rivers of it in his tomb. The result? Mercury poisoning that left him sick, paranoid, and dead at 49. He built tunnels to connect his 270 palaces, never sleeping in the same bed twice, and executed anyone who revealed his location, along with their families. He burned nearly every book in China, history, philosophy, poetry, burying 460 protesting scholars alive to erase the past. His officials hid his death for 2 months, carting his rotting corpse with fish wagons to mask the smell. Qin Shi Huang's legacy is monumental, but his madness set the stage for the gluttonous tragedy we're about to witness in Sweden. In 1771, Adolf Fredrik of Sweden sat down for a meal that would become his last. He started with lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, and champagne, lots of it. Then came more fish, meat, vegetables, a feast for a village. But dessert was his downfall. 14 semla cream buns, his favorite treat. Servants watched in horror as he stuffed bun after bun, cream dripping, his stomach straining. When he stood, he collapsed, dead from digestion problems. The Swedes called him the king who ate himself to death, a legacy of pastry-fueled excess. But as grim as that is, our final king story is a stench-filled horror show that makes Adolf Fredrik look restrained. King Henry VIII of England, ruling in the 1500s, is known for his 6 wives and breaking with the Catholic Church, but the Real Henry was a walking biohazard. A 1536 jousting accident left him with an open leg wound that never healed, oozing pus that could be smelled 3 rooms away. Doctors drained pints daily, packing it with pearls and gold because that's what passed for medicine. Once athletic, Henry ballooned to 400 pounds, needing a device to mount his horse and widen doorways to fit his bulk. He ate whole chickens for breakfast, 13 meat dishes for dinner, vomiting and eating more, drinking gallons of wine daily. His diabetes made his urine attract flies, and his refusal to bathe, thinking it unhealthy, made him a living infection. A head injury from the same accident likely caused brain damage, turning him paranoid and volatile. He'd order executions and forget them by lunch, beheading 2 wives, divorcing one, annulling another, with one dying in childbirth and one outliving him. Yet, he thought he was irresistible, pursuing women who likely struggled not to gag. His portraits showed a slim king, even as he broke furniture with his weight. When he died in 1547, his oversized coffin burst from decomposition gases, leaking fluids that dogs licked up at Sion House. The man who reshaped England ended as dog food, a grim end to a reign of excess. These 11 kings, Charles VI with his glass delusions, Peter III with his dolls, Farouk stealing watches, Martin laughing to death, Christian VII slapping diplomats, Caligula dining with his horse, Ludwig talking to ghosts, Ibrahim drowning his harem, Qin Shi Huang poisoning himself, Adolf Frederick eating 14 buns, and Henry VIII rotting alive, show what happens when power has no limits. They had everything, yet became monsters, eccentrics, or tragedies. As a warning, unchecked power twists minds into something unrecognizable. So, next time your boss seems crazy, be glad they're not making you leapfrog or promoting their pet to management. Thanks for joining this grim journey through history's wildest royals. If you loved these stories, smash that like button and subscribe to Grim Chronicles for more tales your teachers never told you. Drop a comment, whose habits shocked you most? Henry's stench? Caligula's horse? Let us know, and we'll see you in the next dark corner of history.